And here's Adam Silver.
With the first pick in the 2014 NBA Draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers select.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another NBA Redraft by Coast to Coast Podcast. Love the support we've been getting the last couple of videos. About 40 views on our last Sunday, talking about 325 on our MLB race video. Absolutely going crazy. Make sure you guys go down below, follow us on Instagram. We got a lot of content pumping out there daily. But we're going to hop into this 2014 draft, a bit of a step up from the 2013 draft where we saw, a lot of no-name guys going out there. If we did like the first round, I don't think we could name enough players in that entire draft. But this draft, on the other hand, pretty star talented at the top, and then it begins to, fall down. But there's a lot of really solid role guys that any NBA team would want to have on their team. So we're going to hop straight into it. I had the first overall pick. And the first two picks of this draft were two guys that many thought were going to be generational type forwards. We got Andrew Wiggins, the presumed number one pick, basically since he was coming out of high school, and Jabari Parker, a forward from Duke who showed signs of being, the next great Carmelo Anthony, Paul Pierce, so on and so forth, but injuries kind of derailed his career. And Andrew Wiggins, whether it be situation or what happened to him, never really panned out to what he was. So in reality, this pick ended up being traded to the Timberwolves for Kevin Love to form the super team in Cleveland. But today it's staying with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they're going to be getting the best the best center in the NBA when healthy. Because Anthony Davis, I would say, still the best big man, but I'm taking Nikola Jokic here. He just won his first NBA MVP. I think it's pretty straightforward. I wouldn't say there's much contest here. I mean, obviously Embiid's been good, but Embiid's had a lot of problems with injuries. So I'm going to take Jokic, and we're going to move on. Jose's on the board from Milwaukee. Obviously a team just looking for some star power out there. At the time, Giannis still hasn't really come into his own yet. It was just his second season. Chris Middleton's still coming around. Like the joke was saying, these guys are in the NBA Finals right now, and their two best players were 60 overalls in 2K just a couple of years ago. So, Jose, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah. There's really only one guy I could take here, and it's kind of funny that the top two guys coming out of this draft, like looking back, are big men. It's Joel Embiid. He's, probably the most dominant big man when healthy, especially in the post, but he can also, shoot it a little bit. He's very versatile. The thing is, his only caveat is he's only played 51 career games in the NBA, which is just insane. I mean, he can't play a full season. But when he is out there, he's giving you the best chance to win.
Yeah, can't go wrong with that. I mean, literally, he just battled health injuries. I believe it took him 2 seasons to even play on the court. But that opening game when he played against OKC at the Wells Fargo Arena Center was an absolutely fantastic game, showing his array of post moves. I still think he's a guy that we could have 2 MVPs from this draft class. I think if Embiid stays healthy, they get the situation around them fixed. Obviously, Ben Simmons is a guy that probably is going to be on his way out of Philadelphia shortly due to the relationship just not being there anymore. So I'll hand it off to Carson. I think there's really 2 guys that you can debate for this pick, but I think due to the fit, I think there's a guy that might be the clear option here, but I'll hand it off to Carson for the Philadelphia 76ers, who originally selected Joel Embiid, now on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, there's four All-Stars in this draft. Obviously, Jokic and Embiid are both multi-time All-Stars. And then you also have Levine and Randle, 2 other All-Stars. I think those are kind of the 2 players you're alluding to, kind of go back and forth with them. I'm going to go ahead and take Levine just because I think, he struggles defensively at times. I think that's really just due to a lack of effort because he's so athletic that he really should not be as bad of a defender as he is. But I really do think it's just a lack of effort, and just because he has to take so much he takes so much pressure on offense. But I mean, this is a guy that, can really go head to head points wise with any star in the league. And, last 2 seasons, I mean, he was 27 a game, this 25 the season before that, 23 in 2018, 2019. He's just like one of the most like elite bucket getters we have in the league. And I think, that alone, like compared to other guys that are kind of in this range, like Randle, Wiggins, Capella, I think just that that elite scoring alone, I think, is enough to warrant him being taken third overall. I think the Jokic and Embiid argument, I just want to go back to that real quick. It is very, very close. I think if Embiid was just like, played like 10, to 12 more games this season, I think it'd be much, much closer just because his defense is so much more elite than Jokic. But it's a great debate. And I'm so excited to see these two, like, just keep competing for kind of like best center in the league title the next, 4 or 5 seasons, hopefully barring injuries. So that it's just so fun to watch both them, both them finishing 1 and 2 this year in the MVP race. But getting back to Levine, taking Levine at 3 to, so he's the process now, Zach Levine.
Yeah, and I don't think you can go wrong with that. It really took him a little bit to flourish into his own, in Minnesota. I feel like he kind of went under the radar. He was thrown in that Bulls trade, which I'd say the Bulls ended up winning in the long run since, the Timberwolves ended up only getting like Robert Covington and like Dario Saric out of Jimmy Butler when they traded him. So we'll move on to Orlando here. With the 4th overall pick, they selected Aaron Gordon, a forward out of Arizona, who, at this point is really known for being the guy who's gotten second place to Zach Levine in the dunk contest. And then people want to send him off to China now after his playoff performance. Obviously had a really good start when he was on Denver after the trade happened, but don't really know if he's going to be, a long-term answer there at the 4 for the Denver Nuggets. So at the number 4 pick, I'm just going to take the better power forward in this draft. I'm taking Julius Randle, a guy who got injured in his first game of his season, played 14 minutes and got injured. But then, 2015, 2016 on really some like really bad LA teams before, LeBron came around, averaged a double-double. And then obviously this season in New York, he didn't play that great in the playoffs because the Hawks had such good team defense around him. But, 24 points a game, 10 rebounds, 6 assists on 41% from 3, 45.5 in the field. A very talented guy that I think finally got a shot. We saw flashes of it in New Orleans in that one season where he averaged 21.5 and 8.5 rebounds. But, finally into his own in New York. He's a guy that really can't be the focal piece of your team. You got to have a second guy around him. I think, it's going to be RJ Barrett's going to be that third option. Randall's going to be that second option. They got to find another guy. But here in Orlando, he's probably going to be a guy that's going to get a lot of empty stats. But at the same time, I don't really think there's any other person you'd rather have in that situation than Randall because he's going to be consistent with you. Hopefully you have one of the better front courts in the league when you're rocking Vucevic and Randall. So that should be promising. And then Oladipo, maybe you keep Oladipo. Who knows? You don't go out there, you don't get Serge Ibaka because you have a lot of promise from Randall. So, you maybe Oladipo ends up developing into that guy that wins the most improved player, becomes an all-star in Orlando because he was still really talented. So, and Tobias Harris is still on the roster there in Orlando. So you'd have Tobias Harris playing the 3, Randall at the 4, Vucevic at the 5, and Victor Oladipo at the 2. I think that's a pretty solid team. Maybe they get some better draft luck down the road. They could progress into maybe a 6th seed in the East. But right now, they're one of the more
hey, that's better than what they've been doing the last couple of years. So
exactly. They finally blew it up. They're going to have 2 picks in the top 10 of this year's NBA draft. So I'm taking Randall, and we're going to keep moving on down the board. Jose is going to be on the clock with the 5th pick, where the Utah Jazz took the Australian phenom Dante Exum, obviously out of Australia, a guy that never really panned out, kind of that Michael Carter Williams build on him, a little bit more of a shooter himself, but never really turned into the player that the Utah Jazz really needed at that point guard position. That's something that we've been talking about in these NBA redrafts so far, is Utah really hasn't solidified that point guard position through these years. Ever since like kind of Devin Harris was there, and then Mike Conley way down the line was the next guy to step in. So, Jose, I'll hand it off to you. This board kind of gets a little bit iffy from here on out. So a lot more, hot takes we're going to be having here on that.
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted here with the Jazz pick. This was a really bad Jazz roster. This was when Gordon Hayward was still coming into his own as a player. Gobert was nowhere near the guy that he is now. So they really just needed like a guy out there that could take the ball and just like put up points. So for that reason, I'm just going to take best player available. and maybe not the best fit, but I mean, he's definitely a scorer. He's definitely a bucket. And he's developed, a pretty solid defense now in Golden State. And that man is Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah. I mean, don't get you wrong. I mean, he is a bucket getter. I think people really thought they had a lot of faith in this guy after his third season in the NBA. Like almost like in his 22-year-old season, looked like he was going to be an all-star. He had just averaged 23 and a half points on, solid efficiency, 45 from the field, 35 and a half from three. It's kind of unfortunate that he's never really panned out into that like multiple-time all-star that many people thought he'd be. But, like you said, in Golden State, he's been a guy that he's shown a lot of flashes of potential, but like developing into more of like a solid like fourth option for this Warriors team, maybe third option. But he is a guy that is probably going to be a trade candidate this offseason. But still, I wish nothing for the best of him. He's a bucket getter. That's what Utah needed out there with guys like Gobert and Favors really lacking offensive potential. So it would be him at the 2, Gordon Hayward at the 3. I think that'd be a solid scoring combo on the wings.
And plus with Quinn Snyder, who I think has definitely shown he's one of the best coaches in the league that we have right now, and just that defensive identity, I think that just really could have helped shape Wiggins to become the type of defender we've been seeing flashes of in Golden State, like in Utah. I think that really just would have been a great fit for him. I was kind of hoping Wiggins would fall to me at 6 with the Celtics because that was kind of a similar situation where you get him with a really great coach like Brad Stevens. You get him in a system. They're just really great at developing talent. Because I think Wiggins is, you mentioned it, like he still gets buckets. Like he's still, he was still averaging like 20 to 23 points a game in Minnesota. Like that's something, even if it's, somewhat inefficient, like that's still something. I think if you can mold that into more efficient and just improving the defense, getting him in a defensive minded system with his athleticism is just the key. Because I don't think Wiggins was ever really destined, like the number one, like MVP guy that, he was, projected to be, coming into this draft. But certainly like the talent is just, has always been there. It's just really been up to him, like mentally, and also just his situation and his fit, because I think he was just in a really bad spot in Minnesota.
Yeah, but before I hand it off to you, Carson, like you're alluding to, the Celtics got the number 6 pick in this draft. They took Marcus Smart, a guard out of Oklahoma State, who was really good in college. I believe he stayed an extra year when he could have been even a lottery pick the year before. As we see from that draft, it would have been nice if he'd been in that draft, some more talent from there. But this is a Celtics team that doesn't really have a lot of talent looking at it. Obviously, they got a prime Jeff Green right now, averaging 17 points a game on this team going into the offseason. Obviously, they have the very talented Rajon Rondo, but otherwise, they don't really have guys, besides Avery Bradley, but no guys on this team that really panned out into something like fantastic, you could say. So I don't know if you're going best player available. Don't know if you're going to go for fit down the line, but I'll hand it off to you. 6th pick on the board.
It's really hard to imagine the Celtics without Marcus Smart, just because I think he's been, such an integral part of these teams last few years. I mean, you just a guy that kind of everyone wants, a great defender, a great teammate. But I'm not going to take Smart. I think I'm going to go with Capella. He's, 2nd in win shares and 3rd in VORP in this whole class. And this team doesn't really have any centers anyways. I mean, they have Tyler Zeller and Kelly Olynyk as their 2 centers that are on roster at this point in time. And I think, even though Marcus Smart has probably panned out better than Bradley, you already have, Bradley, you have Crowder. Then you also have Isaiah Thomas. And I think pairing Capella with Isaiah Thomas would just be a great fit, because Thomas was so great at getting in the basket. I think not only do you have his elite scoring ability around the basket, but then you have Capella as that lob, dump off option. I think they would have been, a great duo. It just would have been really hard to stop in the paint, especially in those prime Isaiah years, like 2016, 2017 range. I think it just would have been a really, really nice fit, and defensively as well. I mean, Capella's a very, very elite inside defender. So I think it would have been a good fit. It's just tough to not see Smart, but I think I'd probably end up rather having Capella. I definitely rather have Capella right now, but I think over the course of the career, I think Capella as well is probably a better option.
Yeah, and I mean, it's crazy to think that this draft produced like today, like 3 of the top 8 centers in the league. I think you can make a case that Capella could be higher based off the season he had, but I mean, if you're looking at it right now, you got to put guys like Vucevic ahead of him. You got to put Karl Anthony Towns.
You need to
Maybe
pair Capella with like an elite point guard though, and I think like pans out. I mean, Isaiah, was just probably a year or two removed from hitting that elite, threshold that he was at for a couple years. So I just am in love with that tandem. But like Capella definitely needs. I mean, he had Harden, he had CP3, now he has Trae Young. I think that's how you really unlock Capella as a vertical threat.
Yeah, I mean, and now look at it. This is the thing that Boston's been needing for these last couple of years that people keep harping on them from. They never really had a big man. Now they have a guy. If you're looking at this point, I mean, Embiid doesn't end up on the Sixers, but like they would have their big man, the guy that was able to stop the big man. Assuming, let's say, Milwaukee is the team that ends up being that Philadelphia team for them. So it's Embiid and Giannis. That would honestly be the most ridiculous duo we've ever seen. But
oh my God,
Clint Capella would have to, he would be, solid out there, at least limiting what they would be able to do. I mean, I don't think anyone could stop that. I mean, Philadelphia would end up getting, since Embiid wouldn't play and Giannis takes a while to develop, Milwaukee would get more high first round lottery picks. They would have Middleton, they would have Embiid, they would have Giannis. That would be a ridiculous team, but we'll keep moving on, though. More picks to get through in this draft. Number 7, the Los Angeles Lakers selected Julius Randle. Obviously, we talked about him already. But this time, I'm here on the board. Looking who I got here. Just kind of really need a guy that's got potential to really, be the best player out of everyone in this draft. That's still left on the board. And I would take Smart, but I think Smart would have developed too well in that situation. So I'm going to go, even though Smart is ranked higher on my big board, I'm going to take Bogdanovich here, a little bit of a wild card pick. Not really, though. I mean, he had a very fantastic season this year. We got 2 Hawks guys going back to back, but Bogdanovich, light out 3-pointer, a guy that can really create his own shot. He's a playmaker as well. That secondary ball handler that the Lakers would be looking for today alongside LeBron James. But I think he's more of an asset for this team anyway when it comes to trade time. Obviously Marcus Smart's good, but it took a while for Marcus Smart to develop a 3-pointer. While Bogdanovich, obviously, it's going to take a couple years for him to get there from overseas. I think he's a guy that can, he's like a less defense, more offense, like KCP role for this team. So I'm taking Bogdanovich here. And now Jose is going to be so happy here. He gets to rewrite history here. Sacramento Kings with the 8th pick here selected Nick Stauskas, a guard out of Michigan, who really looked like he was going to be that solid, shooter, a JJ Redick type mold, but really never panned out to it, due to some unfortunate management for the Kings. We're praying for them. Obviously, Jose put them as the 5th best team in 5 years, which I think you could see if they get some changing, fire Luke Walton to begin with, but we'll avoid that conversation for now. I'll hand it off to Jose. Yeah. Who are you going to add here to the Sacramento roster at pick 8?
You're really leaving me in a tough spot. I was hoping I could get Bogey, a guy that we've obviously seen succeed in our system. Whether you want to call it a system, that's a different question. But yeah, I'm kind of conflicted here. Now I don't know. I want to take TJ Warren just because we've never had an elite scoring wing, but he's also just super inefficient. I feel like he would have been probably traded within 2 years because we would have never seen results. So I'm just going to take Marcus Smart, a skilled guy, obviously a gritty, defensive guy that's developed into his own as a shooter. And I think could probably still fit on our team today. We could definitely use a guy like Marcus Smart. He doesn't put up the best stats, but he's a bit like Draymond in a sense where his impact goes beyond just the numbers. And he's doing all the little stuff just to get under the other team's skin. So yeah.
All right. One question. Over under 50 combined technicals between him and Boogie Cousins on the same team.
Over.
They might fight in the locker room. I've heard stories of them throwing hands after games.
That would have to be the most toxic team ever. Marcus Smart and Boogie Cousins.
Where did
That's crazy.
Mark go to school?
Smart went to Oklahoma State.
Yeah, State. Dude, he
Him
was
and Joel
really
Embiid have
good.
tons of beef. And you think Joel Embiid's a hostile guy? Look at DeMarcus Cousins. It's getting ridiculous, you know.
I mean, Boogie was on his way out like in the next 2 seasons. So
He would have been out earlier if Marcus Smart was playing with him. I would say that.
Yeah, honestly. Or they would have gelled together because they're both dogs, and like they would have formed like a nice little duo.
Could have gotten the best out of Marcus Smart. Who knows? But
Yeah.
so we'll move on to pick 9. Here, the Chicago Bulls selected a very promising big man in Noah Vonleh out of Indiana. Obviously, in last year's draft, we saw 2 products from Indiana go in the top 5, Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo, but this guy didn't really pan out too well. Bounced around a lot of teams. You know, a solid like rebounding forward, but I think he just was way after his time. His game was a little bit aged. But I'll hand it off here to Carson. Who you have Chicago taking here on the board?
Yeah, I mean, this Bulls team was like, this was really kind of like the last, the last really good Bulls squad. I mean, like this is like the famous, Derrick Rose, like game winner against the Cavs. Like this was this season. And, they had a really good squad. I mean, they made it to the second round of the playoffs. They have, a young Jimmy Butler who's, finally kind of starting to come into his own a bit. D Rose, Joakim Noah was still really good. They had Mirotic, Paul Gasol, one of his last, pretty solid years. Taj Gibson, this is like a really solid squad. And I think, with this pick, I want to give them someone that can, kind of come in right away because this team was already, one of the better teams in the East. To hopefully give them someone, like I said, that can play right away, help, give them a little extra boost in the playoffs. So I'm looking at either maybe like a Dinwiddie or a Clarkson. Gary Harris would fit right in with that defensive identity, with Tibbs. But I think I'm gonna go with the 6th man of the year, Jordan Clarkson. Just he can come in right away and just get buckets for them. It's kind of like similar how it's very similar to what his role is right now in Utah, where it's like a very, very defensive oriented team, and he can just come in and get buckets off the bench. And I think that'd be, perfect for him, especially on this team, to help with the scoring. Just come in, help right away. Doesn't have to play any defense. Let Jimmy, Noah do that. Let Gibson do that, and just go get buckets.
I think that you can't go wrong with that pick. Really similar mold to a guy like Ben Gordon, who had been a really solid scoring guard for that team just a couple of years ago. So we'll keep going on this draft. Philadelphia, since it was the draft night trade, we're just going to stick with the draft order it was to begin with. So Philadelphia here in the clock. Honestly, they just selected Zach LaVine 3rd overall. So there are some guys you might want to put ahead of these guys, but it just makes sense how the board fits. I mean, honestly, they had a crazy big man rotation because they ended up getting Jahlil Okafor and Nerlens Noel. But I mean, Jahlil Okafor hasn't been drafted yet. So I'm going to take a guy that I've praised a lot on this podcast, and I'm going to take Yusuf Nurkich, a big man out of is he international? Yeah, he's international.
Yeah, international.
So, yeah, I mean, a guy who, when healthy, same thing with Embiid, has top 10 center potential. I think the fit makes sense. You got him and Zach LaVine. I would put some guy in there like Jeremy Grant, but we know what he did with Philadelphia. It wasn't anything too special. TJ Warren.
It took a long time to develop, a very long time.
He took a very long time to develop. Obviously, Clarkson's off the board. I mean, TJ Warren, like you said, he's inefficient. I mean, they don't really need that kind of scoring yet. So they had it in Zach LaVine anyway. So I think you got Nurkic down there, down low. I mean, who knows what they do with Michael Carter-Williams. So, yeah, I'm going to take Nurkic there. So we're going to move on. The 11th overall pick, Denver's on the board. Took Dougie McBuckets from Creighton, one of the best college scorers from downtown that we've seen in a long time. So, Gossie, I don't think Dougie McBucket's going to beat the pick here. So I'll hand it off to Jose. Who are you taking at number 11?
We're sticking with Denver as the team, right?
Yeah, Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a guy that was obviously on their team previously, pretty recently, and is like a pretty successful NBA player. Obviously, probably going to get traded soon. Is the best player on a bad Pistons team, and that is Mr. Jeremy Grant. Averaged 22 points this past season. Only 4 rebounds as like a 6'9" dude, which is kind of like hysterical. But yeah, taking Jeremy.
You got Plumlee and Stewart snapping all those rebounds. So
yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, still a really solid guy. I mean, he played really well when he was on Denver. Does Jeremy Grant like give enough promise to them in those couple years where they don't go out there and get Paul Millsap in free agency? Do they spend their money on another guy? Probably spending their money on another guy. Who knows? Denver might be able to have gone farther in the playoffs in these last couple of years because, I mean, sure, Paul Millsap's a very good veteran, but I think they were paying him like $20 million a year. You could have gone out there in free agency and gotten a much more talented wing scorer, before Michael Porter Jr. became around. So we move on here. Pick 12, Orlando's on the clock here. This pick ended up getting traded to Philadelphia, but we're going to ignore that. This is where Dario Saric went off the board, a guy who is really a solid backup big man right now, obviously on a team competing for the championship in the Suns, but don't think Dario Saric is going to be the pick here. Carson, I'll hand it off to you. Where do you have Orlando going here with their second pick in this lottery after selecting Julius Randle 4th overall?
Their second pick. I mean, I'm looking at guys. I'm looking at Dinwiddie, Aaron Gordon, and then also kind of like TJ Warren. I'm looking at those 3 guys. I think I'm going to go with Warren. I mean, you guys mentioned the inefficiency. It's really just with his 3-point shooting. I mean, he was shooting like an abysmal 26% and 22% and 2016 to 2018 range. But I mean, this guy's like the last couple of seasons, he's 53% in 2019, 2020, and then 48% from the field in 2018, 2019, and just gets buckets that I figure, you pair him with Oladipo, Vucevic, and, we got Randall going 4th. I mean, it's a pretty solid squad right there. I like that team in the East. I like them kind of meddling in that 4 to 6 range. I mean, much better than anything they've been doing. But I just like the potential with Warren, where I don't want him being my number 1 scorer, but I would love Warren being my 3rd or 4th scorer, 3rd or 4th possibly best player. I mean, the bubble MVP. So if we make it to the bubble, then that'll be a huge boost with Warren. I think I'd just rather have the elite shot making and scoring of Warren over, what kind of Gordon and Dinwiddie bring to the table.
All right. Well, I think you could have gone Spencer Dinwiddie there to have that point guard, but it makes a lot of sense. Tobias Harris ended up on his way out of Orlando. So smart move for the future of this team. Not to have a guy like Evan Fournier who sat there and ended up getting traded for a 2nd-round pick. So move on. 13 here. Minnesota did select Zach LaVine out of UCLA. Obviously, he's already off the board here. So now I got to figure out where I'm going. On this Minnesota team, they're a year removed from getting, Karl Anthony Towns. And in this situation, they don't get Andrew Wiggins because that trade for Kevin Love doesn't happen. So right now, they're rocking with Kevin Love. They got Nikola Pekovic. They got a bunch of guys that really aren't going to pan out in the league. So I think the only option you got to go with, they got Ricky Rubio there still too, but I'm going to rock with Spencer Dinwiddie, a guy that even if he doesn't start for them, he's going to be one of the best 6-man in the league. Nobody can not want a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, a really good scoring guard who, imagine if the Nets had him in this year's playoffs, dealt with injuries a lot this season. A guy that, he's one of the best. I say he's a top 25 point guard when he's healthy. So I'm taking Spencer Dinwiddie.
If they had him, they for sure would beat the Bucks.
Yeah, because I mean,
top 25 point guard. That means that he's one of the 5 worst point guards if we're going by starting guards. But if he's coming off your bench, then that's phenomenal.
Exactly. So got Spencer Dinwiddie here off the board. That leaves Jose here with the last pick. The Phoenix Suns on the clock. Obviously, they selected TJ Warren out of NC State, and who ended up, like we were talking about earlier, got traded for cash considerations. which, kind of works out in the end. I mean, the Suns are in the NBA Finals. You can't go wrong with that. So, Jose, I'll leave it to you. Who are you taking as the last pick in this draft?
Obviously there's Dario Saric on the board, a guy who's currently on their roster, currently in the finals, contributing on their roster, and another guy who did jack shit this playoffs, who I was sadly gonna take just because of his dunk contest performance, Aaron Gordon. I don't really know where he would fit on this team. They've got both of the Markieff and Marcus Morris. It's like they've got both at this point in time. So I don't know exactly. Maybe one of them gets traded or something. But yeah, a bad Suns team. This is when they had like Eric Bledsoe and like Jameel Wilson, Channing Frye. So
yeah, you
Just
slipped
a
out the
weird
pick here.
squad.
What if you went Joe Harris, though? A guy that could just be a six-man, whatever for them, just shooting the rock for them. I mean, I think he'd fit perfectly. But I think Aaron Gordon works fine. They had a kind of once those Morris twins left, the power forward position was looking to be filled. I know they went after LaMarcus Aldridge when he was in free agency, wound up going to Spurs. But I think Aaron Gordon works fine. A little bit less impactful than a guy like Jay Crowder, but still can provide that defense for them, can provide that athleticism for him. It would be pretty fun to see him and DeAndre Ayton down there playing the front court for them, catching some lobs from CP and Devin Booker.
Yeah. Can we just go over the honorable mentions real quick? I mean, there's still a lot of like really, really solid like role players that we didn't even get to draft. I mean, like you already mentioned Joe Harris, which like he probably deserved to be drafted, but that's just how deep this class is. I mean, Kyle Anderson, who's, getting big time minutes on the Grizzlies. Dwight Powell's been a solid center the last few years. Rodney Hood, has had his moments getting buckets in playoff games. Dario Saric, Gary Harris before he fell off a cliff. Back in the day, like a few years ago, like him and Murray were like one of the best, up and coming backcourts in the league. Like I said before, he just forgot how to shoot the ball. And even Dante Exum, has been a decent, solid, backup point guard.
Alfred Payton.
Alfred Payton too, if you're looking for a defensive minded backup point guard.
NBA champion Torrey Craig.
Torrey Craig's a guy that a lot of teams would want. Just a really deep, solid draft. Like a lot of just really like decent role like guys that are still contributing.
Yeah. Is he the only champion in this draft?
No. Wait, hold up.
That's a good question.
It should have been Joe Harris, but no.
No one. Bruno Caboclo, was he on the Raptors when they won?
Nah, I think he got traded.
Oh yeah, he was gone.
He was gone. I don't know yet. I think so. I mean, there's no one that comes to mind here if I'm scrolling through these names, unless there's like, because I don't think any of them.
They would have been like a 14th or like 15th man or something.
Yeah.
Thanasis was in this draft.
But no, yeah. So that concludes our 2014 NBA redraft. Next, we'll be heading on the 2015 draft, which pretty controversial. We'll see. Obviously, we got the NBA Finals starting tonight at the time we're recording this. So who knows? We might have a different opinion if we see the Phoenix Suns might have a championship. If Devin Booker makes more sense to go.
We'll see how Booker play. Yeah, we'll see how Booker does.
Obviously, going against who'll probably be getting guarded by Drew Holiday. So he's got a tough matchup for him. I think it's going to be a lot of stuff to prove for these two teams. Does Giannis, complete his
who's guarding CP then?
Probably Chris Middleton.
Oof.
Then he was on Crowder.
Crowder doesn't really matter. I mean, they could put like Brook Lopez on him.
Yeah, that's true. Because he just spots up and shoots threes.
Chris Middleton on CP3?
Or, I mean, actually, no. Oh, yeah, because, I mean, who's starting at the – so the two used to be DiVincenzo, but now it's like Pat Connaughton, so it'll be –
Maybe they'll try and hide Connaughton on Crowder or something.
I'd put – what's his name? Drew Holiday on Devin Booker 100%.
Yeah.
So, we'll see, though.
I want to see that, too.
It's going to be an interesting series. Giannis might complete his Hall of Fame resume at 26 years old, or DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker begin their Hall of Fame resumes with the first
And
pick.
CP3, that's like the cherry on top. It's really just like the only thing he's been missing.
And the number one pick from that draft, which we will probably do the redraft for, he's not going to be the number one pick when we do that redraft. Is going to be the guy at the first ring out of that class. So, without further ado, we're going to close this out. Thank you all for watching, and this has been Coast to Coast Podcast signing out. Peace.
Peace.